right, for more on this, we're going to be joined by political analyst Khanyi Magubane. Khanyi, good afternoon. Thank you for your time with us here on the SABC.
A very good afternoon to you and your viewers.
We've heard sentiments from the president a little early on today. And as we perhaps take a look back at the election manifesto in 2019, there were criticisms about some of the ambitious targets, some saying it wasn't ambitious enough. In hindsight, perhaps as we reflect back, what are you observing at this part of the juncture, given that we're edging closer to elections?
Thank you, Liesl. I think that if we look at election manifestos as they are always revealed ahead of the elections, what we are not seeing is a continuation of manifestos from one election year to another. What tends to happen is that parties launch new election manifestos, and in this case, because we are talking about the ANC, we can just focus on that for a little while. If you read the 2019 election manifesto, I took some time to read it and to see the sentiments that are at the heart of it. And it almost seemed as if it was a brand new document that didn't have a sense of continuation from the previous election manifesto. And perhaps that is one of the weaknesses of election manifestos, is that they don't pick up where the other one left off, because that is how you're able to see long-term progression and how a party has progressed over the long term. We heard coming out of this session that it's more difficult to gauge the ANC's progress over a 5-year period. However, if we look at it on a more long-term basis, over a 30-year period, then we are able to gauge the process. But the elections manifestos currently are not set up like that. So I think that the ANC needs to take a look at the documentation it has produced over the years and try to produce an election manifesto that is picking up from where this one of 2019 is leaving off. Let's not continuously start new programs over and over again that seem to get abandoned when new administrations come in, because that lack of continuity is actually what stalls progress in government.
Well, speaking of keeping up, perhaps we could get into some of the objectives and what has also been achieved, the hits and misses as well. The legacy of the president, perhaps during this epoch or this tenure, where are the gaps as well? I mean, obviously we're going to be putting forth, or they're going to be putting forth what has been achieved, and to date, it said that, well, it was reflected that they managed to implement over 70% of the commitments contained in the 2019 election manifesto. Where would you say are some of the misses, though, given some of the strides also that they've reflected on today?
I think some of the misses, Liesl, in what the election manifesto promised. I think the biggest miss for me is actually bringing down the cost of living in South Africa, because the cost of living in South Africa continues to grow and people are continuously pushed under the breadline. And I think that the government, in its promises to create 275,000 jobs in the 5 years, the creation of a simpler entry into markets for new graduates of red-paid work experience as one of the criteria for entering the job market. I think that also in terms of lowering the government spending and also the government's ability to effectively spend their budgets, I think that's where the biggest misses are. Because the more government departments send that money to Treasury for unimplemented programs, then it means that there is someone who didn't get a job, there's an entrepreneur who didn't get a contract because that money was just not spent effectively. So when it comes to its economic policy, I think that's where the weaknesses of the manifesto can be seen, because we heard the president say many times throughout his in his presentation today, he said many a times we have failed in this area. We haven't done well in this area. We have not got our A game. So he admitted himself that it comes to bringing the economy under acceptable levels of unemployment and growing the economy in a way that brings more people above the breadline. There is where I feel the ANC's manifesto has really let South Africans down, because the less economic activity people are engaged in, the more they're going to towards social development. The more we have people who are going on the social grant, the basic income grant, and all of these grants that government wants to set up, it's because they can no longer sustain their own lives without assistance from government. And so when we have an increasing welfare state and increasing employed state, then we're going to continue seeing pressure on taxes and the taxpayer. And so then it increasingly means more money goes towards social development and less on infrastructure development, hospital development, schools, and all the other areas where we need development.
Well, Khanyi, absolutely. And I think many share or echo those sentiments. There was the notion about advancing social transformation, the rhetoric even about building a better Africa, offering other countries incentives for immigrants. We've seen also what's unfolded, perhaps just in the inner CBD in Johannesburg this week, on the back of the inferno, even the gas explosion about a month ago. Some are the view that we're in an era of policy stagnation. There's a need for new ideas and interventions. How do they begin to navigate this as we edge closer to elections come 2024?
Well, I think today's session was one of those free consultations sessions, as my colleague Dr. Temile said, where government gets to hear from academics and think tanks and individuals who have good ideas. And I think that policy stagnation is real, because when I was listening to the session today, I felt especially disappointed in my media colleagues, because I felt that they failed to robustly interrogate policy issues, because that's what today's session was about. It was a review of its manifesto. And I think that if my colleagues in the media had interrogated that policy stagnation, I think we could have really put the president through his paces. To be honest, Lisa, I was waiting and anticipating the president to break a bit of a sweat because of the grilling that he gets from my media colleagues, but that failed to happen. I felt that towards the end of the session, when my colleagues, and maybe I'm biased because I am a political analyst, but I felt that when the analysts and the think tank individuals came in, then we started seeing the tougher questions. Then we started seeing the more specific questions. And I think that's where the president was actually, in some instances, exposed as not having the answers, to the real nuts and bolts of policy stagnation, and why ANC policy, which is ultimately what runs the country, keeps failing in many critical areas.
No, absolutely. That conversation has to continue. And in the interest of time, I'm going to have to leave the conversation there. But thank you for those sentiments and points at this hour. Khanyi Magubane is a political analyst weighing in on some of the sentiments that have been echoed by President Cyril Ramaphosa today in Sandton. This is ahead of the party's 2019 election manifesto review that's also set to take place a little later on today.